Question A3. List the factors that govern the depth and the dimensions, width and thickness of a simple concrete strip foundation in a typical domestic masonry construction. Right, and below you can actually see the list of the actual sort of components. Important compressibility. The less compressible the soil, the actual ground itself, the narrower, the shallower the foundations. The more compressibility we've got, then the greater the risk of settlement. Then we need to actually sort of spread the load over a much wider area. Consistency. When we're actually sort of building any building, we want to make sure that any settlement occurs evenly across the foundation, so the building sinks, and all buildings will sink a little bit, but they do it evenly, and one end doesn't sink further than the other, which will put tensile forces into play, which could be a problem. So we want to have consistency of ground, so we might have to go and find ground that's actually consistent and dig at deep foundations. The water table itself can be a problem, especially if it's actually raised because of underlying sort of soil conditions such as clay. So we need to make sure that the foundations are actually sort of aren't, if you like, affected by the water table. And the water table has the effect of actually sort of lifting up the foundations. It's almost as if they start to float on the water table. Vegetation. Vegetation itself it isn't a problem, but it's the actual the water that the vegetation actually consumes, especially during the summer, can actually cause especially silts and clays to shrink, and that can actually sort of lead to problems. So we might have to actually have deeper, wider foundations because of this. Frost heave isn't really a problem in the UK in terms of normal buildings. It's only when we really get into cold storage, ice rings, things like that. But here, the ground is actually being is being frozen and then being lifted up. So we might have to take our foundations down beyond the zone of freezing. Clearly, the heavier the building, then the wider and perhaps the deeper the foundations need to be, and clearly the bearing capacity of the ground. The weaker the ground, the wider the foundations.